He buried his wife and gave up on love. Then she returned with a baby. Daniel Harper stood quietly by the grave, staring at the mound of fresh earth. The sky was a dull gray, and a soft drizzle fell on his shoulders, soaking the lapels of his coat. Around him, friends and family whispered softly, their words carried away by the wind. But Daniel heard none of it. He could only hear the dull thud of the soil hitting the casket. Each strike felt like a hammer to his chest. His chest tightened. His throat burned. And still he stood there, frozen, as if moving would somehow make this nightmare real. Elena, his wife, had been gone for only a few days, but it felt like a lifetime. She was gone, taken from him in what the authorities called a boating accident. She had gone out on the lake alone, as she sometimes did, to enjoy the calm water and the quiet of early mornings. But that morning, something had gone terribly wrong. The police had explained it carefully, their faces somber and professional, but Daniel couldn't make sense of their words. They said she had fallen into the lake, that the waves had been strong, that she couldn't swim back. Her body had been recovered later, tangled in reeds near the shore. And now, here she was gone, buried beneath the soil, and he was left behind with a pain that felt endless. Daniel remembered the first time he had met Elena. It was at a small coffee shop near the university where they had both studied. She had been sitting by the window, reading a book, completely lost in her world. He had tripped over his own feet while walking past, spilling his coffee everywhere. She had laughed, the sound bright and clear, and had handed him some napkins with a teasing smile. That smile had captured him instantly. Over the years, they had built a life together, small apartments, shared meals, late-night walks, and countless plans for a future they believed in. Elena had always been the heart of their home, filling it with laughter, warmth, and hope. And now all of that had vanished. He could still picture her face in his mind, the curve of her smile, the sparkle in her eyes when she was excited, the gentle way she touched his arm when she wanted his attention. Every memory now cut like a knife. He thought of their last conversation just days before the accident. She had called him from her office, her voice light and happy. "Don't forget the cookies," she had joked, remembering that he had been craving the chocolate chip ones she always baked. He had laughed, promising to save her some. That was the last ordinary moment they had shared. Everything after that had been filled with confusion, police reports, and unbearable grief. As Daniel stood there, he realized that he was not just grieving her death. He was grieving the life they had planned together. The dreams they had whispered to each other in quiet moments, the trips they had planned for the next summer, the home they had talked about buying by the lake, all of it now felt like ashes in his hands. He felt a hollow emptiness inside, a darkness that seemed to seep into every part of his being. The thought that he might never hear her laughter again, never see her smile, never hold her hand, was almost too much to bear. The people around him seemed like shadows. Friends, family, colleagues, all offering words that sounded empty to him. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," they said repeatedly, as if repetition could fill the void inside his heart, but no words could. He noticed his parents standing a few steps away, faces pale, hands trembling as they held tissues. Even they, who had loved Elena like a daughter, seemed unable to offer comfort. He remembered how she had loved them too, how she had always called them just to check in, to make sure they were happy. That part of life was gone now. He knelt beside the grave when the casket was covered completely, resting his hands on the cold soil. "I will never forget you," he whispered. His voice was barely audible, swallowed by the wind. "I will always love you." He wanted to cry, but tears felt distant. They had dried up somewhere along the way, replaced by a deep ache that went beyond anything he had ever known. His mind kept running over every moment, every word, every touch. Why had this happened? Why had she been taken from him? Questions spiraled endlessly, but no answer ever came. For days after the accident, Daniel had wandered through a fog of disbelief. The apartment they shared now felt like a museum of memories, each corner filled with traces of Elena. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter, a lipstick stain faintly visible on the rim. Her scarf hung over the chair in the bedroom, the smell of her perfume lingering faintly in the air. Every object reminded him of her, and every reminder made the emptiness inside him grow. He tried to go about normal life, checking emails, answering phone calls, walking the dog, but nothing felt real. The world had become muted, dull, colorless. Sleep offered no refuge. At night, he would lie awake staring at the ceiling, imagining her voice, imagining her face, imagining her smile. Dreams were worse. They brought her back only to take her away again. He would wake with a start, the pillow damp with tears he could not stop. He even considered leaving his job, leaving the city, moving somewhere far away. Anywhere that didn't remind him of her. But he stayed, unable to let go completely, unable to face life without her at all. Friends tried to reach out. They invited him for dinners, for walks, for movies. Daniel appreciated the gestures but could not respond. Their words felt meaningless. He felt isolated, trapped in his grief, unable to step out into the world. Even the simplest tasks, like cooking or grocery shopping, felt impossible without her. The thought that she would never walk into the kitchen humming a tune again, or tease him about leaving his shoes on the floor, was unbearable. At the same time, Daniel realized that he was angry. Anger at the lake, at fate, at life itself. How could something so cruel happen? How could he lose the person who meant everything to him? The anger mingled with his grief, creating a storm inside that left him exhausted. And yet, even in his anger, he felt powerless. There was nothing he could do, no one to blame, no way to bring her back. One morning, a week after the funeral, Daniel found himself standing at the edge of the lake where she had been taken from him. The water was calm now, a mirror reflecting the gray sky. He stared at the surface, thinking of her last moments. Did she fight? Did she struggle? Did she think of him? The questions were unbearable, but he asked them anyway. He could not stop asking. He whispered to the lake, his voice carried by the wind. "I will never love again," he said. "No one can ever mean to me what you meant." He pressed his hand to the cold water, as if trying to feel a connection with her spirit. For a long time, he simply stood there, letting the silence and the mist surround him. The lake had taken her once. He would not let anyone else take his heart again. Over the following months, Daniel slowly withdrew from the world. He stopped going out, stopped answering calls, stopped replying to messages. He sold their shared apartment and moved into a small, empty studio. Pictures of her were packed away in boxes. Gifts, letters, and small tokens of love were hidden in closets. He could not bear to see them, and yet he could not throw them away. They were a part of her, a part of their life together, a part he could not erase. He developed routines to distract himself. Morning runs along the quiet streets, long hours at the office, weekends spent reading or watching movies alone. But no matter how busy he became, thoughts of Alina returned. Every laugh, every smile, every gentle touch haunted him. Friends who tried to reconnect eventually stopped. They could not understand the depth of his grief. Daniel did not blame them. He simply accepted that he was alone. Even as he tried to build walls around his heart, there were moments when memories broke through. He remembered the night they had danced in the living room, barefoot, to a record she loved. He remembered the way she had cried quietly after a fight, her tears falling onto his shoulder as he held her close. He remembered the trips to the mountains, the quiet mornings sipping coffee together, the countless tiny acts of love that had filled their days. Those memories were bittersweet, beautiful, yet devastating. Through it all, Daniel kept one promise to himself. He would never love again. No one could replace Alina. No one could fill the space she had left behind. His heart was hers and hers alone. That promise became both a shield and a prison. It protected him from further pain, but it also kept him from moving forward, from finding joy, from allowing life to touch him again. And so, Daniel Harper spent his days walking through a world that felt gray and empty. He went through the motions of life, but his soul remained buried in grief. He had lost the person who meant everything, and the wound seemed too deep to ever heal. And yet, even in the depth of his sorrow, a small, fragile part of him still whispered a faint hope that, somehow, life might one day surprise him again. Nearly 2 years had passed since Daniel Harper had buried Alina. In that time, he had built walls around his heart so high that no one could reach him. He had learned to live with the ache, the quiet void that her absence left behind. His days followed strict routines: wake up, go to work, come home, eat, sleep, repeat. Nothing new, nothing unexpected. Life had become predictable, almost safe. He had promised himself he would never love again, and so far he had kept that promise. But he had not imagined that the universe had a way of breaking even the strongest vows. It was a chilly October evening when it happened. Daniel had just returned from the office, tired from a long day of meetings and paperwork. He carried a small bag of groceries, the soft hum of the heater filling the quiet apartment. He was thinking about a cup of tea when a sudden knock echoed through the door. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was one of the neighbors or perhaps a delivery. But the knocking came again, firmer this time, demanding attention. With a sigh, Daniel set down the groceries and walked to the door. He opened it slowly, expecting the usual, a neighbor, a delivery man, or maybe a friend checking in. But what he saw made him freeze in place. Standing there was Alina, alive. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, but Alina, the woman he had mourned for 2 long years. Her hair was slightly longer than he remembered, and her face was paler, drawn with lines of worry and exhaustion. Her eyes, however, were unmistakable, the same bright, sparkling eyes that had once captured his heart completely. She looked at him, her lips trembling slightly, as if she had rehearsed what she would say for months but still found no words strong enough. And in her arms was a baby, a small, delicate child wrapped in a soft blanket, eyes closed as if sleeping peacefully. Daniel could not breathe. His mind refused to process what he was seeing. He had buried her. He had said goodbye. He had mourned. And now she was standing in front of him with a child he had never known existed. The world seemed to tilt and spin around him. "Alina," he whispered, his voice breaking. He could not find any other words. 2 years of pain and longing, 2 years of emptiness, all of it surged at once. He felt like a man who had been living underwater and suddenly gasped for air, but even the air could not fill the void she had left. She spoke softly, barely above a whisper. "Daniel, I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I had no choice." Her voice carried a mixture of fear, guilt, and desperation. She took a small step forward, careful not to startle him. "I need you to listen, please." Daniel could barely move. His mind raced. Questions poured in faster than he could answer. How is this possible? Why is she here? Why now? What is this child? He felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him, leaving him suspended in a nightmare. Alina held the baby closer, her hands shaking. "This is Myra," she said softly. She is yours, Daniel, not by blood, but she is our child in a way I cannot explain yet." Daniel shook his head. "Yours, our child? What are you talking about? I don't understand. You were dead." "You were gone." His voice grew louder, panic rising as his emotions flooded over. "I buried you. I watched your casket go down. I cried for you. And now you're here with a baby." Alina's eyes filled with tears, and she took a step closer. "I know this is hard to believe, Daniel. It's hard for me too. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to leave you. But I was scared. I was overwhelmed. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. And then, when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to face your anger, your disappointment. So I left. I thought disappearing was the only way to protect everyone, including you." Daniel felt as if the ground beneath him had cracked open. Every emotion he had buried in the past 2 years, grief, anger, despair, longing, rose up together like a storm. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. He wanted to hold her and shake her at the same time. His hands trembled and his knees felt weak. "You left me," he managed to choke out. "You left me to think you were dead." "I'm so sorry," Alina said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to come back. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I thought you would never forgive me. I thought I had ruined everything." Daniel took a step back, trying to collect himself. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, anger, confusion, and a flicker of hope he did not dare acknowledge. "Why now?" he asked finally. "Why come back now after all this time?" Alina looked down at the baby in her arms. "Because I can't live with the lie anymore. Myra, she deserves to know her father. And you deserve the truth. I have spent 2 years hiding, running, and being afraid, but I can't do it anymore. I need to face what I did." "I need to face you." Daniel's hands shook. He could not speak. His heart was pounding so hard he felt it might burst. The baby stirred in Alina's arms, stretching tiny arms and opening wide, curious eyes. Daniel looked at Myra, and something inside him softened, even amidst the anger and confusion. She was innocent. She had done nothing wrong. She was a part of Alina, and in a strange, inexplicable way, a part of him too. Alina stepped closer again, slowly, gently, as if approaching a fragile, wounded animal. "Daniel, please, I know I don't deserve it. I know I have no right to ask anything from you. I need you to know the truth. I am alive. I am sorry. And Myra, she is here. She is your family, even if not by blood. Please, don't shut the door on her on us." Daniel sank into a chair, head in his hands. His mind was spinning. 2 years of mourning, of isolation, of trying to survive life without her, all of it had led to this moment. He felt betrayed, yes, but he also felt a strange, confusing surge of relief. She was alive. She was here. And there was a baby, a new life, a possibility he never could have imagined. He looked up at her. I don't know what to say, he admitted, voice trembling. I don't know if I can forgive or understand. I don't know how to even feel right now. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed, it's gone. Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I don't expect you to understand immediately. I only ask that you listen. I only ask that you give Myra a chance and maybe give us a chance too to start over slowly, carefully, honestly. Daniel felt like the world had shifted under his feet. He wanted to run away. He wanted to slam the door and pretend this never happened. But he could not ignore the baby. He could not ignore the woman he had loved with every part of his being. Myra looked at him with wide, trusting eyes, as if sensing that he was important, as if feeling a connection he could not yet name. For hours, they sat together in the quiet apartment. Elena told her story, how she had staged the accident, how she had fled with the help of a distant relative, how she had lived in fear and hiding, how she had struggled to survive and care for Myra. She spoke of nights spent crying herself to sleep, of longing for Daniel, of guilt so heavy she thought she could not bear it. She spoke of the mistakes she had made, and of her desire to make things right, starting with the truth. Daniel listened, alternating between anger, sorrow, and a strange, aching hope. His mind could not reconcile everything at once. He wanted answers, explanations, a way to understand how life could be so cruel and yet so strangely miraculous. He wanted to feel the warmth of Elena's hand in his again, but he feared it. He wanted to hold Myra, but he hesitated, afraid of the unknown. As night fell and the apartment grew quiet, Daniel realized that something fundamental had changed. The life he had built around grief and isolation was no longer enough. The world he had known had shifted. The woman he thought he had lost forever was standing in front of him. And there was a child, a symbol of life, hope, and a new beginning, demanding that he respond, that he face reality, that he reconsider everything he thought he knew about love and loss. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if he could forgive or trust or love again. But one thing was certain, his life, once so carefully sealed off from emotion, had been reopened. The past and the present had collided in the most unexpected, impossible way. And Daniel Harper, the man who had sworn never to love again, was about to confront a truth far bigger than grief, far deeper than betrayal, and far more complicated than he could have imagined. The knock at the door had changed everything. Daniel Harper sat in his small apartment, staring at the floor. The evening light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the walls. He could hear Elena in the kitchen softly humming while Myra slept in her arms. The sound should have been comforting, but instead it felt like a storm inside him, pulling at every nerve. He could not breathe easily. His mind was a tangle of thoughts, confusion, and a rage he did not fully understand. How could she have left him? How could she have let him mourn her, bury her, believe she was dead, and then come back with this? He remembered every detail of the funeral. The damp air, the smell of flowers, the faces of friends and family blurred with tears. He remembered kneeling at her grave, promising that he would never love again. And now, here she was, alive with a baby in her arms. A baby he had never seen before. His body wanted to move, to reach out, to grab her and demand answers. But his mind refused to allow him any calm. Elena, he finally said, voice low but trembling, I need the truth, all of it, no excuses, no stories meant to soften the blow, I need everything. Elena's face paled and she nodded slowly. I will tell you everything, Daniel. I promise, but you have to listen carefully and not react before I finish, please. Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. He could feel every heartbeat in his chest, pounding like a drum. He wanted to understand, but he also wanted to yell, to cry, to shake her until the answers came. But he held back. He had learned 2 years ago that anger alone did nothing to heal. Elena sat down across from him, placing Myra gently in a bassinet nearby. Her hands were shaking and she pressed them together as she began to speak. 2 years ago, after the boating accident, I didn't die, Daniel. I wasn't in the water long enough to be lost forever, but I was drowning in other things. I was overwhelmed with debts, pressure from work, and secrets I couldn't tell you. I found out I was pregnant soon after a mistake, a choice I made that I am not proud of. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to face the consequences, so I ran. Daniel's chest tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table. You ran, he whispered almost to himself. You left me to mourn you? Alina nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I thought disappearing was the only way. I thought it would protect us, protect you from the truth. I thought if you never knew, you would never be hurt. I was wrong, Daniel. I was so wrong. He shook his head violently. Wrong? You call this wrong? I buried you. I grieved for you. I built my life around your absence. Do you even understand what that did to me? I do, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. And I am so sorry. Every day, every moment, I regretted leaving you. I wanted to come back, but I was scared. Scared of your anger. Scared that you would never forgive me. Scared that you would hate me. Daniel leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. The apartment felt small, suffocating. He wanted to scream at her, to demand every answer, but he also felt a part of him breaking open in a strange way. She was alive. She had returned, and there was a child, innocent, helpless, and entirely dependent on them both. Who is the father? Daniel asked finally, his voice low but sharp. He needed to know. The question burned inside him, but he had to ask. Alina hesitated, looking down at her hands. I can't tell you. He isn't in the picture. He left before I could explain, and he doesn't know Myra exists. She has only me, Daniel. I need your help. Not to take her away, not to replace anyone, just to help me give her a safe life. Daniel felt the anger rise again, hotter this time, mingled with confusion and sorrow. He wanted to lash out. He wanted to run. He wanted to hit something, anything, to release the tension inside. But Myra stirred in her bassinet, opening wide eyes and looking directly at him. The innocence of the child cut through his fury. She had done nothing. She was not responsible for Alina's decisions, and somehow, despite everything, he felt a flicker of protection toward her. I don't know if I can forgive you, he admitted, voice trembling. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can even feel anything other than anger and betrayal. I don't expect forgiveness, Alina said quickly. I don't even expect understanding yet. I only ask, please don't let my mistakes destroy her life. Myra needs her father. She deserves a chance. I know I failed you. I know I failed both of you, but I want to make it right now if you'll let me. Daniel leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of Myra. He thought about the last 2 years, the isolation, the grief, the nights he had spent crying alone, the emptiness that had filled every corner of his life. He thought about all the times he had promised himself never to love again, never to hope, never to let anyone in. And yet here she was, standing before him, alive with a child who needed him. He opened his eyes and looked at her. Alina's face was pale, tear-streaked, but open, honest, vulnerable. There was no mask, no pretense, only a woman who had made mistakes and had returned to face the consequences. And in that moment, Daniel realized something he had not allowed himself to feel in years: compassion. A small, fragile, and trembling compassion that struggled to pierce the walls of anger he had built around his heart. You're asking me to trust you again? He asked cautiously. After everything. I'm asking you to try, Alina said softly. Not for me, not for us. But for Myra. Give her a chance at a life with both of her parents involved. Give yourself a chance to do something good even after all the pain. Daniel's hands shook. He had so many questions, so many emotions, and yet one thing was clear: he could not ignore this child. Myra was a living connection to Alina, yes, but also to life itself. She represented a future he had not imagined, a chance to heal even if it was small, a chance to step out of the shadow of grief and make a difference. Over the following days, Daniel struggled to adjust. Every conversation with Alina brought both clarity and confusion. He learned about her struggles, the fears that had driven her away, and the love she had still held for him despite her mistakes. He watched Myra closely, noticing the little habits she had, the way she cooed when she was happy, the tiny hands that reached for warmth, the soft gurgle of her laughter. Slowly, the child became a reason to exist beyond grief, and yet the anger never fully disappeared. Daniel found himself questioning everything. How could Alina have made such a choice? How could she abandon him so completely? How could she think leaving was better than facing the truth? The questions haunted him, and every answer felt incomplete. But in the quiet moments, when Myra slept peacefully and Alina sat nearby, Daniel began to understand that life was rarely simple. People made mistakes. People hurt each other. But sometimes people also tried to make things right, even if imperfectly. One evening after putting Myra to sleep, Daniel and Alina sat together in the living room. The apartment was quiet, the soft hum of the heater filling the space. Daniel spoke, his voice steady but thoughtful. "I don't know if I can ever feel the same way about you," he admitted. "But I do know this: Myra deserves better than the mistakes we've made. And I want to be part of her life, somehow, even if it's just as a presence, a guide, someone she can count on." Alina nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "That's all I ask," she said softly. "That's all I've ever wanted, for her to have a chance, and for you to have peace even if it's not perfect." Every day brought a new challenge, small arguments, moments of doubt, and emotional flashbacks to the days he had mourned her. Yet slowly he began to realize that life had changed in ways he could never have expected. Myra, the little girl with bright, curious eyes, was the center of everything. She was a living reminder that despite betrayal, mistakes, and pain, life had a way of moving forward. Alina worked hard to rebuild her life. She enrolled in a course that allowed her to improve her skills and gain financial independence. She was honest with Daniel about her past, answering questions carefully, never hiding details, and showing her commitment to being present for Myra. Her honesty was fragile at first, but over time, Daniel began to trust her again, not as the woman he had loved before, but as someone who had survived her own mistakes and was determined to make amends. Daniel found himself helping in ways he hadn't imagined. He would cook for Myra, changing diapers, singing her little songs he remembered Alina teaching her. At first, it felt awkward and unfamiliar, but soon, a rhythm developed. Myra would smile up at him, her tiny hands reaching for his face, and in those moments, Daniel felt a warmth he had thought lost forever. He realized that love could take many forms, not only romantic love, but also love born from care, responsibility, and commitment. One morning, as he sat in the living room watching Myra crawl across the carpet, Daniel reflected on how much his life had changed. 2 years ago, he had been broken, withdrawn, and certain he would never love again. He had believed that the grief of losing Alina had closed off his heart forever. Yet now, he was learning to live again, not through forgetting the past, but by accepting it and making space for new possibilities. Myra had given him a purpose beyond himself. Despite the small moments of peace, there were still challenges. Friends and family struggled to understand the situation. Some could not forgive Alina for leaving, for the lies, or for the disruption she had caused. Daniel had to navigate these tensions carefully, explaining that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and that mistakes did not erase the potential for change. He became a mediator, not only for Myra's sake, but to protect himself from old resentments that threatened to pull him back into despair. As the months passed, the legal consequences of Alina's disappearance began to unfold. Authorities reopened the case surrounding her supposed death. There were hearings, investigations, and questions about why she had staged the accident. Daniel attended some of the hearings reluctantly, determined to support Alina and ensure that Myra's life was protected. He was shocked by the scrutiny, the judgment of strangers, and the detailed examinations of Alina's actions. It was uncomfortable and humiliating at times, but it was necessary. Alina faced charges for fraud and falsifying her death. The legal process was long and emotionally draining. Daniel watched her endure interviews, court appearances, and questions about the choices she had made. At times, he felt his anger resurface, memories of betrayal flooding back. Yet he also saw her strength, her willingness to admit her mistakes, to face consequences, and to be accountable for her actions. It was difficult, but Daniel began to respect her resilience. Respect, he realized, was a form of healing in itself. Myra, despite the chaos, continued to grow. She laughed, learned new words, and began taking her first wobbly steps. Her presence in the apartment softened the atmosphere. She was the center of gravity, keeping Daniel and Alina connected in ways they had not anticipated. Watching her interact with both of them, Daniel realized that family could take many forms. It was not always defined by blood alone, but by care, presence, and commitment. One afternoon, as Daniel helped Myra stack wooden blocks, he found himself reflecting on the unexpected lessons of the past 2 years. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. People made mistakes, lost their way, and caused pain to those they loved. But it was also capable of surprising moments, small joys, and new beginnings. He understood now that grief and hope could coexist, that acknowledging pain did not prevent happiness, and that the past did not have to define the future. Alina approached him quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Daniel," she said softly. "I know things aren't perfect. I know I've caused so much pain, but thank you for staying, for helping, for being here for Myra." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "It's not about forgiveness, not completely. It's about moving forward. She needs us. And somehow I've realized I want to be part of her life. We both do." Elena smiled faintly, tears welling in her eyes. "That's all I hoped for," she said. "I just want her to grow up knowing she is loved, and knowing that even when people make mistakes, they can still try to make things right." As the years went by, Daniel and Elena developed a working, caring relationship. They were not husband and wife again, at least not in the way they had once been. But they were partners in raising Myra, united by their love for her and their shared understanding of the past. Daniel sometimes allowed himself to feel hope, a quiet but steady feeling that life could be meaningful again. He discovered that love could take many forms. It was not always about romance or passion. Sometimes it was about showing up, staying present, being patient, and giving care where it was needed most. In Myra's laughter, Daniel found joy. In Elena's honesty and effort, he found trust slowly rebuilding. And in himself, he found resilience he had not known existed. One evening, as Daniel and Elena watched Myra sleep, he thought about the past, about the grief, anger, and confusion he had endured. He thought about the promise he had made at her grave to never love again, and realized that it had been made in a place of despair. Life had a way of proving that the human heart could heal, even from the deepest wounds. Even after betrayal, disappointment, and loss, it was possible to care, to nurture, and to find meaning in unexpected ways. Elena spoke quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "I know I can never change what I did," she said, "but I hope maybe we can build something better, something honest, something real for her, and maybe in some small way for us too." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, for her, and for us in whatever way that can be." The months turned into years. Daniel watched Myra grow from a curious toddler into a bright, joyful little girl. He attended her first day of school, helped her with homework, and celebrated every milestone. Elena continued to work, building a life of honesty and stability. Daniel continued to support her, not as a husband, but as a partner in parenting and in life. Together, they learned to navigate the complexities of their situation. They had moments of tension, of old wounds reopening, but they also had moments of laughter, small victories, and shared pride in Myra's growth. The child had become a bridge, a reason to care for each other despite the past. Daniel often reflected on how different life had turned out from what he had imagined. 2 years ago, he had been certain he would never love again, certain that his life was over in a way. But now, he understood that love was not just about romantic relationships. Love could be quiet, steady, and patient. Love could be about responsibility, care, and commitment. Love could survive betrayal, grief, and mistakes. On Myra's 5th birthday, Daniel and Elena organized a small party in their living room. Friends and family came, laughter filled the air, and Myra's excitement was contagious. Daniel watched Elena hand Myra a birthday cake, the child's eyes lighting up with joy. In that moment, he realized that despite the pain, the heartbreak, and the years of grief, life had a way of giving second chances. Daniel quietly placed his hand on Elena's shoulder. "We've come a long way," he said softly. Elena nodded, smiling. "We have. And we still have a long way to go, but I think we can do it together for her." Daniel looked at Myra, at the joy and life she brought into their home, and finally felt at peace. He realized that life was not about perfect endings, but about the courage to continue, to forgive, and to build something meaningful even after the darkest times. The story that had begun with a grave, a promise never to love again, and a devastating loss had not ended there. It had transformed into a story of resilience, second chances, and the enduring power of love in all its forms. Daniel Harper had learned that even after heartbreak, life could surprise, heal, and provide hope where none seemed possible. And so life continued, messy, unpredictable, but full of small joys, lessons learned, and the quiet happiness of being present for someone who needed him most. Daniel Harper had buried his past, faced his pain, and discovered that love in its many forms could survive even the most impossible circumstances. Daniel realized that forgiveness, trust, and love were complicated, messy things. They did not come all at once. They required patience, honesty, and effort. But the first step had been taken. He had chosen to remain, to listen, and to consider a future that included Elena and Myra despite the pain of the past. For the first time in 2 years, Daniel felt a small spark of hope. Not a grand, overwhelming joy, but a quiet, steady light that suggested life could continue. Mistakes had been made. Hearts had been broken. Grief had carved deep valleys in their lives, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. And so Daniel Harper began the slow, careful process of rebuilding. Not his marriage, not his life as it had been, but a life that could include forgiveness, responsibility, and the fragile, beautiful presence of a child who needed him.